Steve, 30, a realtor had almost everything a man could ever ask for. One of the few things he was unlucky with was love. He couldn't find and keep romantic friendship, and this was a constant strain in his life. He was, however, determined to keep trying. One night, he was driving home at night when he saw a lady standing by the roadside. He knew it was dangerous to stop and carry strangers at that unholy hour, but decided to give it a try out of compassion. His glittering car screeched to a halt. The woman, who appeared to be in her early 30s, looked both surprised and relieved as Steve rolled down his window. He offered a polite smile. "Do you need a ride, miss?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yes, please. My car broke down, and I've been trying to get help for an hour. Thank you so much." Steve unlocked the car door, and she quickly slid into the passenger seat. "I'm Steve, by the way," he said as he pulled back onto the road. "I'm Emily," she replied with a warm smile. "I really appreciate this, Steve. It's not easy finding someone willing to help at this hour." Steve glanced over at her and caught a glimpse of gratitude in her eyes. "It's no problem at all. Where are you headed?" "Just a few miles down this road. I live in an apartment complex nearby," Emily directed, relaxing a bit into her seat. As they drove, they made small talk, covering topics like their professions. Steve shared a bit about his work as a realtor, and Emily mentioned she was an art teacher at a local high school. Their conversation flowed naturally, and Steve found himself surprisingly at ease. Before long, they arrived at Emily's apartment complex. She turned to him as she unbuckled her seatbelt. "Thank you again, Steve. You're a lifesaver." "Anytime," Steve replied, feeling more content than he had in a while. "Would you like me to walk you up to make sure everything is all right?" Emily shook her head with a smile. "No need. I've taken up enough of your time already." As he drove away, Steve couldn't help but think that perhaps his luck in love might be changing after all. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but meeting Emily had certainly brightened his night. He forgot to take her phone number. Anyway, he would go to her home the next day, he thought. Steve set out the next day to visit Emily. His expectations were mixed, but he was optimistic. An hour later, he stopped at Emily's home, a modern piece of architecture. On ringing the doorbell, an elderly man came out. "Good morning. I'm Steve and looking for Emily. I don't have her number to call before coming." The elderly man peered at Steve for a moment, then smiled warmly. "Ah, Steve, come in," he said, opening the door wider and for him to enter. "I'm Emily's father, Mr. Thompson." Steve stepped inside, admiring the modest design of the home. It was filled with natural light and tasteful decor, reflecting a blend of modern aesthetics and homely warmth. "Please have a seat," Mr. Thompson said, gesturing toward a plush sofa in the living room. As Steve sat down, he couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and curiosity. He wondered how Emily would react to his visit and whether his optimism would be rewarding. Mr. Thompson fixed a drink for him and sat down with teary eyes. Sitting in opposite direction, Mr. Thompson leaned forward. "Emily, my daughter, passed away 5 years ago. She appears to those she connects with. You are the 4th person," he said, with tears in his eyes. When Thompson broke the news to Steve that Emily had passed away, Steve felt an overwhelming shock that left him momentarily speechless. The world seemed to tilt off its axis, and the room around him felt suddenly colder, emptier. Emily had been with him just a day prior. This news was something he was utterly unprepared for. He tried to grasp at memories of her laugh, her kindness, the endless conversations they had shared that night. On the next day, he was met with a profound sense of loss that enveloped him. The weight of the reality began to sink in, and he felt tears welling up in his eyes. Steve's mind raced with questions and disbelief, struggling to come to terms with the painful truth that Emily was really gone. Words failed him as he got up to leave. He showed grief and empathy, and walked to the door. The weight of his grief bore down on him heavily as he navigated the drive home. Each mile felt interminable, and the familiar roads seemed strangely foreign in his numb state. His mind was a tumult of disbelief and sorrow. As he gripped the steering wheel, Steve's thoughts alternated between cherished memories and the painful reality he now faced. Tears blurred his vision, but he pressed on, desperate to find the privacy of his home, where he could begin to process the sad situation. The drive seemed eternal, punctuated by moments of aching silence and the quiet hum of the engine that underscored the void he felt.